Imagine hearing a rumor so often that eventually everyone treats it like a fact. At Erwin High School, students have been hearing the same story for years. A story about what lies beneath the campus. Not an old building, not forgotten tunnels, graves, unmarked graves. The kind of graves that belong to people whose names were lost long ago. And depending on who you ask, some of them may never have left. Now, before you dismiss this as another school ghost story, there's something you should know. The rumor didn't appear out of nowhere. It came from a real piece of local history, and that's where this story gets interesting. Because once we started digging into the claims, we found ourselves asking a completely different question. Not whether the school is haunted, but why so many people believe it is. Every school has legends. A haunted staircase, a locked room nobody talks about, a teacher everyone swears still walks the halls. Most disappear after a few years. This one didn't. For decades, students at Clyde A. Erwin High School in Asheville, North Carolina, have repeated the same story. The land was once a potter's field. If you're wondering what that means, you're not alone. Most people have never heard the term. A potter's field wasn't a traditional cemetery. It was a burial ground for people who couldn't afford private burial, had no family, or whose identities were unknown. And historically, many of those graves weren't marked. No headstone, no monument, sometimes barely a record. Just a patch of ground, and eventually, forgotten history. Which leads to the obvious question. Could a school really have been built on land connected to one? The deeper you go into local history, the more complicated things become. Some longtime residents insist the story is true. Others say it's been exaggerated over the years. And like many local legends, the details change depending on who's telling it. Some versions claim the burial ground occupied part of the property. Others insist graves had to be moved before construction. Then there are stories claiming not all of them were relocated. That's usually where the conversation shifts from history to folklore. Because here's the truth. The existence of local stories doesn't automatically make every detail factual. And one of the biggest mistakes people make is confusing legend with evidence. But something doesn't have to be proven to become powerful. It just has to be believed. And at Erwin High School, people believed it for a very long time. Think about it. Imagine hearing this story as a freshman. Then one day a strange noise echoes through an empty hallway. Suddenly the rumor feels more real. A flickering light becomes suspicious. An unexplained sound becomes a story. A coincidence becomes evidence. That's how legends survive. Not because people are lying, but because people naturally connect mystery to mystery. And once a school develops a reputation, every generation adds something new. A new experience, a new rumor, a new story. Until nobody remembers where the legend ended and the facts began. But honestly, the ghost stories aren't the most interesting part. The people are. Because if this land truly was connected to a potter's field at some point in its history, then we're talking about people who were almost erased from memory. People who may have lived difficult lives. People who left behind few records. People whose names may never be known. That's the real story hiding underneath the legend. Not fear, not ghosts, memory. Because history has a strange way of resurfacing. Sometimes through documents, sometimes through photographs, and sometimes through stories people refuse to stop telling. Today, students walk these halls without giving much thought to what existed here before them. And that's normal. Most of us never question the ground beneath our feet, but every town has places like this. Places where history and folklore collide. Places where facts fade just enough for legends to take over. Whether the stories surrounding Erwin High School are completely true, partly true, or simply the result of decades of retelling, one thing is certain. The rumor has survived longer than most students ever will. And sometimes, that alone is enough to make a place unforgettable.